What if everything you've been told about currency collapse is wrong? What if the real danger isn't money printing, but something far more invisible? Throughout history, governments have printed mountains of money, yet many of their currencies survived. Others collapsed overnight, even when printing wasn't the main problem. So what actually kills a currency? Is it inflation, corruption, or something deeper that most people never notice until it's too late? Why did some nations drown in hyperinflation while others survived even bigger debt and money creation? And if the same patterns keep repeating across centuries, could it happen again? Before a currency dies, something else always breaks first. The question is, can you see it before everyone else does? Most people believe currencies collapse for one simple reason. Governments print too much money. The story sounds logical. A reckless government starts running the printing press. Too much money floods the economy. Prices explode, panic spreads, and the currency dies. It's a clean and mechanical explanation. But history tells a very different story. Money printing is often blamed because it's easy to see. Numbers grow, central bank balance sheets expand, and inflation appears. But printing is usually not the cause of collapse. In many cases, it's the final response to a much deeper problem. Governments print when they cannot collect enough taxes, when they cannot borrow cheaply, and when their political system cannot handle the economic adjustments required. To understand how monetary systems actually fail, we need to shift our focus away from the printing press and toward something far more powerful: political authority and fiscal strength. Money is not just paper or digital numbers. It represents a promise that the state behind it will continue functioning tomorrow. A promise that taxes will be collected, contracts will be enforced, and debts will be honored. That promise is built on trust. And when trust disappears, currencies begin to weaken long before inflation becomes visible. History offers powerful examples. In the 16th century, Spain suddenly became the richest empire in Europe after discovering massive silver mines in the Americas. Ships filled with precious metals crossed the Atlantic for decades. On the surface, it looked like unimaginable wealth. But Spain's economy had a structural weakness. Instead of building a strong domestic tax system and productive industries, the crown relied heavily on silver flowing from its colonies. At the same time, Spain borrowed heavily to finance wars across Europe. When silver shipments slowed or were intercepted by enemies, the entire financial structure collapsed. The Spanish crown declared bankruptcy multiple times during the 1500s. The problem wasn't simply too much silver entering the economy. The deeper issue was that Spain lacked a stable internal fiscal foundation. The same pattern appeared centuries later in Britain after World War I. The war left Britain deeply indebted and economically weakened. Inflation rose, gold reserves drained, and the British pound faced intense pressure. In 1925, Britain made a controversial decision to return to the gold standard at its old pre-war value, effectively overvaluing its currency. The result was severe economic pain, rising unemployment, and widespread unrest. Yet despite all these pressures, the British currency system did not collapse. Why? Because the political system still functioned. Taxes were still collected. Parliament still operated. Investors still trusted the government enough to lend money. Britain bent under pressure, but the underlying institutional structure remained intact. This reveals something important. Monetary systems rarely collapse simply because of economic stress. They collapse when the political system behind them begins to fracture. One of the most famous examples of monetary collapse is Weimar Germany in 1923. Images of people pushing wheelbarrows full of banknotes have become the universal symbol of hyperinflation. But what many people miss is that the printing press did not start the crisis. It followed it. After World War I, Germany faced enormous reparations demanded by the Treaty of Versailles. Political violence was spreading across the country. Then in 1923, French and Belgian forces occupied Germany's industrial heartland, the Ruhr region. After Germany failed to deliver reparations payments, in response, the German government encouraged workers to stop cooperating with the occupation. Factories shut down. Production collapsed. Tax revenue disappeared almost overnight. Yet the government still had to pay millions of striking workers. With no tax income and no ability to borrow internationally, the state turned to the only tool left: printing money. Hyperinflation followed, but it was the result of political and economic breakdown, not the original cause. The same structural story appeared again in Argentina decades later. In the 1990s, Argentina tried to stabilize its economy by pegging its currency directly to the US dollar. At first, the policy worked. Inflation dropped and foreign investment poured in. But the system had a dangerous weakness. Argentina had large debts denominated in foreign currency. When economic growth slowed and tax revenue struggled, investors began to doubt the government's ability to maintain the currency peg. Confidence evaporated quickly. Capital fled the country. By 2001, the entire system collapsed, triggering one of the largest sovereign defaults in history. Again, the deeper issue was not simply money creation. It was the mismatch between external obligations and internal credibility. Across centuries and continents, the pattern repeats. Monetary systems fail when governments lose the ability to collect revenue, when political factions refuse compromise, when debt obligations exceed economic capacity, and when citizens stop believing the state can maintain order. Inflation is loud. But the real collapse begins quietly, long before prices spiral out of control. This is why many developed economies today can sustain extremely high debt levels without experiencing currency collapse. Japan, for example, has government debt exceeding 250% of its entire economy. The central bank has purchased massive amounts of government bonds for years. Yet the Japanese yen has not collapsed into hyperinflation. The reason is structural stability. Japan's debt is mostly owned by its own citizens. Its institutions remain functional. Its tax system still works. And most importantly, the political system maintains legitimacy. Money ultimately reflects power and trust. As long as a state can tax its population, enforce laws, and coordinate political decisions, its currency can survive enormous economic pressure. But when that authority fractures, collapse accelerates. And that's the real lesson from history. Currencies do not die when governments print money. They die when governments lose control. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers.